Good morning, it's Monday, the 20th of April. I'm Maret Gwyn and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of morning news and analysis live here on Euronews. Coming up on today's show, Bulgaria's Russia-friendly former president Rumen Radev and his progressive Bulgaria party have won a landslide victory in Sunday's parliamentary elections. The latest estimates suggest he's around 30 points ahead of his nearest rival. We ask what the result means for Bulgaria and for Europe. And the EU and the incoming Hungarian government have agreed to work together to swiftly release billions of euros in EU funds to Hungary. Meanwhile, outgoing Prime Minister Viktor Orban has hinted he could lift his veto on a 90 billion euro loan to Ukraine if Russian oil flows resume this week. We'll bring you all the details. And Tehran has, quote, no plans for now to participate in a second round of peace talks with the US, expected today in Pakistan, according to Iranian state media. It comes amid a deepening standoff over the Strait of Hormuz and amid reports that the US earlier seized an Iranian-flagged ship near the strait. We'll have more details. But first, we're taking you to Bulgaria, where the former president, Rumen Radev, an EU critic who has been described as sympathetic to Russia, has won a convincing victory in Sunday's parliamentary elections. His centre-left coalition has vowed to stamp out a, quote, oligarchic governance model after years of political gridlock in the country. We can now bring in Euronews' Marina Stoimenova, who has been following events for us there overnight in Sofia. Great to have you with us, Marina. Good morning. I know there are votes still being counted as we speak, but talk us through where we are as things stand right now.
Good morning from Sofia, Marat. Indeed, the results are already shaping up to be extremely interesting here. Although the counting is still underway, one thing is clear. Rumen Radev, the former president who stepped down in January, is winning the elections, and more, for the first time in nearly 30 years, Bulgaria will have a government with a full parliamentary majority, which means that this might put an end to a very long political crisis here in the country. Rumen Radev is leading with almost 45%, far ahead of his competitors. Former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov, very well known in Europe, this is a very interesting fact, may even fall to third place. And another key factor is the vote from abroad, which has yet to be fully counted. It is expected to favor Rumen Radev's progressive Bulgaria. If that holds, he could edge closer to 50%.
And Marina, we know Brussels will be watching this result very closely, of course. What could this mean for Europe?
Well, he's certainly perceived as more friendly toward Moscow, largely because of his statements during his presidency. Rumen Radev has opposed many times the decisions of Bulgaria to support Ukraine. And even yesterday, he said that he hopes Bulgaria will develop practical relations with Russia based on mutual respect and equal treatment. At the same time, his tone last night was a bit different. He was seeking for the questions of foreign media because he wanted to bring a message to Europe, and this message was very clear. Bulgaria will remain firmly on its European path, and still he didn't shy away of criticizing the European Union. Let's hear what he said last night.
Bulgaria will pay efforts to continue its European path, but believe me, strong Bulgaria in strong Europe needs critical thinking, needs pragmatism, because Europe has fallen a victim to its own ambition to be a moral leader in a world without rules.
Rumen Radev, the winner of the Bulgarian election on Sunday. And thank you, Marina Stoimenova, for that update for us from Sofia. But now for more on the significance of this result for Bulgaria and also for Europe, we can bring in Martin Vladimirov, who is an expert analyst for the Center for the Study of Democracy. Martin, good morning. Really good to have you with us on the show this morning. Assuming Radev does form form a government now, and I think we can assume that based on the results. What do you expect from him in terms of his foreign policy and his approach towards the EU?
Well, before the election results came out, which are really a landslide, unprecedented victory for one party, we have been monitoring his and his party's social media engagement, and the data is very clear. There have been a huge increase in pro-Russian narratives disseminated by his social media accounts. He has been staunchly kind of anti-sanctions and kind of countering Russian influence in Europe over the last decade or so. There have been reports back when he was being voted in as president that his campaign was coordinated with the former security services of the Kremlin. So a decade later, we may see a pragmatic Bulgarian leader who will remain pro-EU on the surface. But as in previous times, we have seen Bulgaria being a very practical Trojan horse for the Kremlin. Even when they talk pro-EU and pro-NATO policies, underground or underneath this rhetoric, we can see actions that undermine, for example, the phase-out of Russian oil and gas in Europe, or undermining the sanctions policy against Russia and the support for Ukraine.
Okay, it's very interesting what you say. So based on that, can we expect him to step into the shoes of Viktor Orban, for example, or do you expect him to be more collaborative on the EU's Ukraine policy?
I think Mr. Radev will be much more collaborative than Mr. Orban. He will not be openly anti-EU policy. He will probably vote in favor of many of the EU actions, but I don't doubt that there will be attempts on his part and on his government to undermine the strength of these actions, similarly to what Mr. Fico has been doing in Slovakia, nominally supporting EU policy, but trying to undercut and find loopholes and gaps into this policy. So this is a major win for the Kremlin, I think, culmination of a long strategy of Russia to solidify its influence in the country. But I don't think we should exaggerate this process.
Okay.
We're about to see what will happen. Anti-corruption policy would be his first item on the agenda. So I think domestic politics would trump foreign policy in the beginning at least.
Okay, thank you so much, Martin Vladimirov, an expert analyst for us there. But moving on now from Bulgaria to Hungary, where the incoming government of Peter Magyar held initial talks with senior officials from Brussels over the weekend, raising expectations that EU funds to Hungary frozen under the leadership of Viktor Orban could be unblocked. Our correspondent Sándor Síros is here to tell us more. Good morning, Sándor.
Good morning.
Listen, I know you've been speaking to officials about these talks over the weekend, which are quite significant. Tell us more.
Yes, it's a very unusual and very symbolic visit in my view, because I have never seen a European Commission delegation visiting a country and not sitting down with the actual government, but with party officials who are trying to set up a government in 1 month. But the clock is ticking, and this is the main issue, because if Hungary and the future government of Peter Magyar does not agree with the allocation of 10 billion euros under the recovery funds by the end of August, this money will be lost. But now what we have seen over the weekend is that both parties, the Commission and the TISA party, is willing to work to find a solution how to get these funds for Hungary. And, remember, if they ever get this, it's a symbolic step, because, the Commission could say that we are supporting a pro-European government, but also it's a huge, huge money injection for the Hungarian economy, because 10 billion euros is more than 4% of the Hungarian GDP. So let's take a look of what Peter Magyar said after the talks over the weekend. He said, real work must begin so that the EU funds due to the Hungarian people finally arrive in Hungary. The consequences of the mistakes and crimes of the outgoing government will not disappear overnight.
And Sándor, at the same time, Viktor Orban hinting he could in fact lift his veto on that 90 billion euro EU loan to Ukraine.
Yes, exactly. So Orban tweeted yesterday that he received information that Ukraine could resume the oil flows via the Druzhba pipeline. This issue caused a lot of troubles between Hungary and Ukraine, and also on European level, because Hungary blocked the EU's 90 billion support package for Ukraine because of this pipeline issue. Now, 1 week after the election, finally everything could be resolved, and Orban could finish his mandate by resolving this huge issue. It's very significant politically for me that everything is happening in such a big speed. Let me quote Orban here: Hungary's position has not changed. No oil, no money. Oil deliveries are restored. We no longer stand in the way of approving the loan. Now, the next question is what Péter Magyar will do with the Russian oil and gas supplies. Is he willing to decouple from Russian fossil fuels? It's not clear for the moment.
Okay, Sándor, thank you so much, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from you, including on that Druzhba dispute very soon. Now, there is a precedent to releasing EU funds frozen over rule of law concerns, and that is the Polish experience following Donald Tusk's election in 2023. Our Jakub Janis explains.
Péter Magyar has made his first diplomatic priority clear. Before Brussels or Vienna, Hungary's Prime Minister-elect is heading to Warsaw to meet Donald Tusk. And in late 2023, the Polish Prime Minister wrote the modern playbook on unwinding years of entrenched illiberal rule. Now Magyar is looking to apply it, especially as the two leaders expressed a similar to-do list across 3 key areas. What are they? To bypass an opposition president, Tusk's government used a parliamentary resolution to instantly dismiss state broadcast management, literally taking the network offline overnight. And Magyar is threatening the exact same shock therapy. Following a heated interview last week on public television, which he linked to North Korean propaganda, he explicitly vowed to suspend the national broadcaster's actual signal the very moment he takes office. And for judiciary, both leaders may join European Public Prosecutor's Office a day one priority, reversing their predecessors' refusals to participate. However, Tusk is still struggling to implement a full judicial reform. He has faced a severe gridlock, requiring complex legal acrobatics to bypass presidential vetoes. Magyar, however, wields a 2/3 constitutional majority. EU officials are already in Budapest negotiating the release of over 10 billion euro in recovery funds, knowing Magyar has the parliamentary numbers to push the necessary reforms. Finally, Tusk rapidly purged the management boards of state-owned enterprises, with the oil giant Orlen being the most famous example. And Magyar is preparing a similar sweep across Hungary's state-backed institutions. He plans to recover state assets and cut funding to ideological networks, like Matthias Corvinus Collegium or MCC. However, this strategy could have downsides. Rushing invites legal missteps, and advocates of the outgoing governments argued that neither Orban nor Morawiecki directly obstructed the transition. One thing is certain: from illiberal to liberal transitions, the new approach seems to rely on shock therapy to dismantle the old system overnight.
Jakub Janis reporting there. Now to the Middle East next, where Iran is yet to confirm its participation in a second round of peace talks with the US in Pakistan. It comes amid a deepening standoff over the passage of vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. For more, we can bring in our correspondent in Dubai, Jane Witherspoon, who's standing by for us. Good morning, Jane. Good to have you on the show again. Reports this morning that an Iranian-flagged ship has been seized by the US near the Strait. Tell us more.
Good morning. Yes, US forces have seized that Iranian-flagged cargo ship in the Gulf of Oman. It was the ship called Tuska. Video released by US Central Command showed USS Spruance issuing warnings to the Iranian ship to stop. They ignored and was subsequently fired upon. Now US Marines have custody of that vessel. Of course, President Trump took to his social media to share the news. And this comes obviously only a few hours after accusations of ceasefire violations in the Strait of Hormuz were made. Iran's military have said that they will be responding soon. They're calling the seizure an act of piracy. And again, this is going to cloud the chances of further peace talks happening in the region.
Jane, briefly, we're also seeing intensifying diplomatic contacts between European leaders and leaders in the region.
Of course, the British military have actually just raised its top alert level in the Strait of Hormuz. They're calling the situation critical. In addition to that, British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper was here in the UAE on Saturday, hosting bilateral talks, cementing the relationship between the UK and the UAE. Later today, I will be heading down to Abu Dhabi to do an exclusive Euronews interview with the British ambassador to the UAE, Ed Hobart. So I'll be bringing you all the latest lines from that throughout the day.
OK, Jane, thank you so much. We'll be keeping an eye out for your reporting during the day, of course. But moving on now, over the weekend, Spain's Pedro Sánchez rallied global leaders in Barcelona at a convention billed the Progressive CPAC. While the Spanish Prime Minister is applauded abroad, he's facing mounting challenges at home. For more, our Europe editor, Maria Tadeo, is here with me in the studio. Good morning. Great to have you back. You were in Barcelona over the weekend. What did this convention achieve, if anything?
Well, yes, Marit, I was there for the 2 days. Big convention, obviously big names too. The Spanish Prime Minister was the host, but you also had the President of Brazil, Lula, the Mexican President, the Colombian President, the President of South Africa, Ramaphosa. Obviously, they have all clashed one way or another with President Trump. In terms of the convention, what did they achieve? I would argue they achieved a photograph, a moment. And that, obviously, we're seeing there in the pictures. That matters in politics because politics is about the optics and it's about the symbols too. And ultimately, coming out of this convention, what they argued is that there is an alternative to global MAGA, which of course they suggest is fueling hate, sexism, war, tariffs, commotion in the world. So I think what they've shown now is politically the pendulum has really shifted from the left to the right, and they're seeking now to say, look, there is an alternative, and perhaps we can now bring that pendulum back to progressive ideas. It was also relevant because over the weekend, and perhaps we can put it up on the screen, there was a battle of rallies too in Europe. In Madrid, there was an opposition rally that took place in the capital city, but also in Milan, there was a rally of the far right of the European Parliament, so the hard right in the European Parliament, going from Jordan Bardella to Matteo Salvini, saying the complete opposite, that Europe is now facing big issues with illegal migration and security. But the goal of this convention in particular, the one led by the Spanish Prime Minister, was to really show that picture that there is an alternative.
And at the same time, Maria, Spain leading calls to review or even suspend the EU's broad association agreement with Israel.
Yeah, indeed. So that was another idea put forward by the Spanish Prime Minister, who's obviously trying to boost his profile in international politics, suggesting yesterday that Spain will present tomorrow at a foreign affairs meeting the idea of suspending now fully this association agreement with Israel. Obviously, this is not a new idea. It has been pitched in the past. It always hits a wall. Even the idea of a partial suspension has been complicated. But again, a lot of this is about the image of the Spanish Prime Minister. This is an idea that plays very well with the European left because it is incredibly critical of Netanyahu. And for the Spanish Prime Minister, is also a way of changing the conversation. The past week, it's been very difficult on a legal basis for Pedro Sánchez. His wife, his brother, obviously are all facing legal issues, and he needs something that can really catapult his profile going into 2027. I spoke with his entourage over the weekend, and they all told me the same thing. One way or another, he is going to run in 2027. There is absolutely no way at this stage in which he will not contemplate being the lead candidate for the Socialists. And now he's winning internationally. He needs that domestically because his position is so weak in Madrid.
OK, Maria, thank you so much for that update, and we'll keep a close eye on those talks in Luxembourg between EU foreign ministers tomorrow. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with more news and analysis at the same time, same place tomorrow. In the meantime, do get in touch with us. Send us your tips and questions to europetoday@euronews.com. And we'll see you very soon here on Euronews.